I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll catch up on the state of the governor's race, including more about the candidates and their plans to lower property taxes. Jesse Balmert is here today to help me break it all down.
Thanks for having me.
In case you've been, living under a rock, Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton are running to be Ohio's next governor, and it seems like it'll be a close one. The Cook Political Report recently switched its rating to a toss-up. Jesse and one of our colleagues both had stories this week that dug into Ramaswamy and Acton's backgrounds. Let's start with yours, Jesse. You looked at Acton's resume, which includes a stint as director of the Ohio Department of Health. What do we know, and why has it become so important?
Yeah, I think most Ohioans know Dr. Amy Acton from her time as state health director, which Governor DeWine appointed her in February of 2019. She was actually his last cabinet pick and the first woman to hold that position. DeWine wanted someone who was really going to focus on public health, and Acton had experienced homelessness in her youth and overcome a lot, and so was excited about Acton as a pick. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic descended on all of our lives in around, early, certainly ramped up by March of 2020. And that really overtook anything else that the two of them were going to work on together. Acton resigned from that position in middle of 2020, and it was around the time when she was getting a lot of criticism. There were protests at her house and just a lot of backlash against some of the health orders. At the time, she didn't really say why she was leaving, but people close to her said it wasn't for any particular protest or health order. Now that she's running for Ohio governor, she's focused on, she has said that she didn't want to sign health orders that would go against her oath as a doctor, particularly ones pushed by former House Speaker Larry Householder. One that's come up is a requirement about county fairs, which certainly the Republicans have jumped on.
Yeah, I think there have been cutouts of her at some of the county fairs this summer, right?
Yeah, essentially Amy Acton didn't want to allow county fairs to go forward, and after she left that position, Mike DeWine did allow local county fairs with certain health restrictions. At the time, this was before we had vaccines widely available. There was some questions about sometimes how COVID was spread. But I think knowing what we know now, outdoor events were less likely than some other certainly indoor, closed spaces, nursing homes, for example, to have spread. So a lot of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking or after the fact quarterbacking on each one of those health orders.
Yeah, for sure. And with her resignation, she had been in that job for about 16 months. You found, looking back at some of her other positions in recent years, that she really hadn't been with an employer for more than a year and a half, which her Republican opponents have been quick to criticize. What does that job history look like, and why has she bounced around?
Yeah, so after working for the DeWine administration, she stayed on a couple of extra months after leaving as state health director to work as an advisor for DeWine. And then she moved to the Columbus Foundation, which is kind of a fundraising and philanthropic organization in the city. She worked with their kind of kindness operation for about 5 months. At that point, she considered a run for U.S. Senate. That was after Republican Rob Portman had announced that he wasn't going to run again. J.D. Vance, now our vice president, got involved. Ultimately, Acton decided not to run, and Tim Ryan became the Democratic nominee, and he lost to Vance. After that, she worked for an organization called Rapid 5, which was trying to kind of improve infrastructure and support for waterways in Columbus, and was in that job for about a year. Basically, Acton's campaign says each one of these were examples of her public service and was able to fundraise and effectively do a good job at all of these spots. The Republicans are saying that this was a lot of job hopping and moving around, and will she, stick with the job of Ohio governor?
Yeah, I think I've seen some push back against this criticism of her as well, noting that Ramaswamy has done his own hopping around. He was at the Department of Government Efficiency, for example, for 69 days, I think.
Yeah, certainly that was a shorter stint than anything on Amy Acton's resume, so you could be the judge.
Now, let's pivot to Ramaswamy, who could become Ohio's first billionaire governor. Our colleague Alex Coolidge analyzed his finances and found he's twice as wealthy as he was when he first launched his campaign. A lot of this comes from his stake in Roivant Sciences, which is the pharmaceutical company that Ramaswamy founded in 2014. What does he say about his personal wealth?
Yeah, so if you've been to a Ramaswamy event, you'll hear this phrase over and over again that he didn't start as a millionaire, didn't start as a billionaire, I didn't start as an anything-aire. And that's really the pitch that he's making to voters, that he started in kind of suburban Cincinnati to immigrant parents who did not have tremendous personal wealth and was able to work at a biotech company and then found Roivant and continue on with other businesses. Certainly, the fact that he is a billionaire has been a point of conversation in this campaign so far. How popular are billionaires in an election where people are talking about affordability quite a bit, but it's kind of do you see Ramaswamy's history as aspirational and inspiring, or do you see it as, problematic and out of touch with Ohioans?
Yeah, I think Ramaswamy told Alex that, he views his experience as the American dream, essentially, and, a path that maybe other people will be able to find themselves on. But Acton's campaign has really seized on some of this. They argue he's out of touch, and there's also a lot of monitoring now of his private jet and where he is traveling, in some cases for the campaign, but in some cases not.
Yeah, I think the average Ohioan doesn't have access to a private jet, and so that's certainly something Democrats are pointing out. But perhaps if you're a billionaire, a private jet is not so uncommon. So
the candidates aside, we are slowly learning more and more about their policy ideas. This week, Acton laid out a blueprint for lowering property taxes, which remains a big concern for people. What's her plan?
Yeah, so Acton has pitched a variety of kind of solutions to rising and, high property tax prices. It's worth noting that neither Acton nor Ramaswamy are calling to eliminate property taxes entirely, which was the push of a ballot initiative group that is now targeting 2027. But some of Amy Acton's ideas focus on this homestead exemption, which basically exempts from taxation a certain amount of money on your property value. It's available to lower income seniors and individuals with disabilities and a couple other categories. This is an area that folks have targeted for relief because they're seen as kind of the people who might need the most amount of help. So she would make that more accessible, expand it to an additional about 55,000 Ohioans. Another idea she has is a rebate for certain homeowners whose property taxes increase by 4% or more. That would be eligible to people whose household income is $132,000 or their home value is about $350,000. So that's not everyone in Ohio. But again, you see this example of targeting it to middle class, lower class, working class Ohioans.
Gotcha. What has Ramaswamy said about property taxes?
Yeah, Ramaswamy has said that he wants to roll back property taxes to where they were at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe that's 2021, 2023, depending on which metric you're looking at. A group called Innovation Ohio, which is a kind of left-leaning think tank, has estimated this would cost about $2.4 to $4 billion. And so there is some question about where that money would come from. But Ramaswamy really lays the blame for this increase in property taxes on inflation, driving up home values on these reassessments. And he says a lot of that is the Biden administration's fault.
And in terms of paying for this, he's talked a little bit about it. I think the details remain murky, but At the Ohio Chamber of Commerce recently, he said basically that economic growth is going to help, make up for that gap when property taxes are rolled back.
Yeah, and he's relying on some of that economic growth from a cut in income taxes on capital gains. So things like investments, which is something he wants to do in his first budget if elected, and then rolling down, like kind of phasing out of the state income tax, which is currently at 2.75%. It's a flat tax, and Ramaswamy would like to eliminate it entirely over an 8 to 10 year period, which Republican lawmakers have been phasing it down and like reducing the number of brackets for quite some time. So that's certainly in line with that.
Well, this certainly will not be the last time we talk about the governor's race. Lots more to come. One more thing before you go. The Ohio State Fair starts next week, and it'll be DeWine's last hurrah as governor. We also expect plenty of other cameos by politicos who want to show they're just like us because they eat fried Oreos.